I'm Dan, and this is 10,000 Hours of Indie, a podcast exploring new music and delving deeper into what goes on in the background of the independent music industry. I'm a musician and passionate music lover, and I wanted to delve deeper into new music in the independent scene around the world. I also saw this as a chance to help artists connect and share their stories, so if there's someone you hear and you want to find out more about, every podcast has links in the show description. Get involved, help this community grow, follow on the 10,000 Hours of Indie socials, you can find all the links in the show description. And also feel free to email me about anything music related, 10,000indie@gmail.com. I'm open to any ideas and love listening to your promos. Dez Dare is Darren Smallman, label owner, marketing guru, audio-visual artist, booking agent, and for this interview, indie rock musician. Growing up in Australia and being heavily influenced by the 90s punk scene, in which he was heavily involved in bands, he found his way to Brighton in the early 2020s, setting up a studio, producing music and videos. He has just released his latest album, These Days Are Wild and Blind, and I thought it was time to delve into his overstimulated mind. Darren, welcome to the podcast.
How you going? You all right?
All good, yes. Let's start in the 90s. You were in Australia during the last great music boom, playing punk and rock alongside the likes of Fugazi and the Dirty Three, living the dream, it seems.
Yeah, it was a really good scene at that time. I mean, Geelong's actually taken off again recently. It kind of slowed for a while. In the 70s and 80s and 90s, like Geelong had a really busy band scene. Bands used to come there all the time and tour there when they did Melbourne. And they always come to Geelong as well. And it was a really good place to be. I mean, you know, so you'd easily get gigs and play like a load of cool bands. We're all really lucky to have done so. But most of us moved to Melbourne or overseas. I moved to the UK in the 90s and then back down to Melbourne, like a lot of people. And Geelong kind of dwindled for a bit, but like now it's come right back. There's a bunch of like record stores down there and record labels, and it's kind of getting back on track again. But yeah, it was a good time to start playing music, and it was like a real sort of DIY attitude as well. You know, I mean, everyone was just like get on stage. I mean, the first gig I ever did, I mean, I was like 15. The other two guys were like 12 and 13. I mean, we were horrible. I've still got the cassette to prove it. Everyone said it was great. It was just like these kids on stage just hammering out some Stooges covers and some shitty originals, and you know, I mean, it was just like I can do it. You know, I mean, that's really nice and like you know, kind of really nice sort of thing to sort of attitude to grow up in.
Then there's a big chunk of your history missing from your bio until you get to Brighton. So can you fill in that gap?
Me and like one of my old bandmates, an old friend of mine, Simon, we started kind of releasing records under the name Load Transit in Australia. And we kind of started doing quite well with the record label. And I made the decision to not do bands and records at the same time because I don't have the attention span to do. Well, I definitely did not at that point anyway. Maybe now I could more, but being autistic and then being very a little bit like, you know, kind of all over the place when I was younger, I definitely could not do running a whole band and doing a very busy record label. So we kind of like did that for a long time. And when I moved over here, I hadn't played music in a while, and I was just working in arts for charities, theatres, festivals. It just took me a while to get back into it. You know, finding the time, finding the sort of energy. And like Dez Dare started as a weird kind of thing. You know, I mean, it was like a pandemic project. It was meant to be with a couple of other friends, and you know, I mean, they flaked out, and I got bored of waiting and just decided to, you know, build the studio that I'm currently in and just start churning out more music than anyone wants to hear. And that's kind of the gap, I guess. You know, I mean, I made a deliberate effort. Like, I did run a record label briefly, like when I first moved over here, but I really kind of focused on just kind of work for a while, but then realised the work's really boring. And I'd much rather just, help put out some records and play some riffs.
That makes sense. I totally understand that theory. And now you've got music, management, bookings, audio-visual work, and more. So you don't sort of sit around twiddling your thumbs very often, I guess.
It's not as busy as it sounds, to be fair. I help out God Unknown, who releases my records currently, and you know, kind of help out Jason. You've been a record label owner before. I mean, being one person running a record label is tough work. When I started working with Jason, we were talking about kind of some stuff the label could do with. And like, I mean, I've got lots of experience in running PR and radio plugging. I've been doing it for a long time at this point. When I started doing it back in the 90s, so I was very happy to help out. And it's kind of something quite nice to do, I think. I mean, I quite like helping bands kind of get out there a bit. The visual stuff, I mean, I've never done any work for anyone else apart from me. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I do a bunch of different things, but yeah, definitely not as busy as my signature makes it out to be.
Okay, let's move on to the release. You've got a new album out, or at least you sort of do. You've decided to do something a bit different with this release. Explain.
Me and Jason also do some PR and plugging work for other record labels as well. We've been kind of thinking about the marketing side of things. And last year, I actively decided to do what our distributor wanted us to do for DSPs and things like that. Kind of doing all this space to kind of content stuff and doing 20 billion videos for a release. I said I'm going to do it all, everything they want, and see how it works. And yeah, it didn't get me anywhere. And it was a lot of work. So I wouldn't suggest to do that for anyone. But what I did decide to do with this record was to release it only on Bandcamp as an album, and basically just release the streaming services, one song a month over 12 months. I mean, I think sort of it's a really weird situation we're in currently. Kind of having to prolong releases and trying to give streaming services. I mean, what's his face, the war profiteer that runs Spotify? He proudly stood up in front of a bunch of musicians and stuff and said, "You should just release content and put out one song a month and not do albums." And it's just it's that kind of mentality that's frustrating, but it's actually kind of what you need to do these days, I think. So I suppose this is a compromise. Anyone who wants the album needs to give me their email address and engage with me on my platform. Anyone who's not that fussed, which to be fair is most people, they can get it one song at a time and they can wait for the good songs later on.
So let's talk about the album itself. There's an obvious indie rock theme running through the album, but you cross an awful lot of subgenres in there as well.
It's the nicest way I've heard it described, if I'm going to be honest. I played up in London the other night and talking to a couple of people about this sort of thing. I'm not very good at sticking to something, sticking to a style. I couldn't think of anything worse than just doing kind of the same song 12 times and then do another album, same song 12 times. I know some people probably don't like that so much because, they want an album that's cohesive and they can just dance to it or cry to it or whatever they want to do to the album. It's never going to be the way my brain works. My brain is cluttered at the best of times and that comes through in what I produce. But I also think that's quite nice. I think there's a thread running through it of when I create the music. It always sort of starts with bass and drums, and there's always kind of a real kind of fuzzy, driven beat, sort of running underneath it, and then kind of everything else kind of just, rolls over the top of it. And that's kind of the thread. And hooks. Love a good hook.
There's some very cool little sort of late 80s, early 90s synthesizer bits snuck in there under the radar as well.
Oh, you don't worry about that. Yeah, I love a good synth. The first band I was ever in, I always wanted to have, it was a synth in the band. They were never fucking into it. I was like, oh, it was fucking great back in, the 90s, having a 15-year-old synth, synth, doing bass on the synth would have been cool.
You've said you started writing the lyrics for these songs between Berlin and Brussels shows. What was your initial spark of creativity for this particular album?
I have a very kind of formulaic way of making records, really. I do kind of collect ideas over time. I have an app on my phone that I'll, kind of collect ideas in. But generally, I don't really write an album over a long period of time. I'll come in and I'll write it from start to finish in a couple of months. And again, it starts very much with kind of laying down those kind of initial ideas and then building on top of those. The lyrics is something I do not love so much writing. They always take me a bit longer than everything else. Lyrics are important, but I just find it probably the most hard. And I actually wrote a lot of the lyrics for this record when I was on tour last year. I did quite a few shows last year, especially in Europe. I had quite a few gaps in between. So I spent a lot of time by myself in cities, which I guess is where some of that came from, kind of just sitting around in parks or in bars or cafes, kind of just trying to write lyrics and thinking about kind of just being away from home. And the idea of touring as well is kind of a weird thing, I think. I mean, I've worked with touring bands for a long time, and kind of hearing their stories about being on the road for like 11 months of the year away from home, and kind of thinking about like me being away for like weeks at a time sometimes. That's kind of, I suppose, where a lot of this came from for the record, and it's an interesting concept. I think it's a weird space to be working away like that and just not be. You're engaged with the community around you, but not in the same way as you are at home.
You played almost everything on the album except a few backing vocals, violin and saxophone. Is that because you're a control freak, or is that just because that's the way you like to work? Or a bit of both?
It depends on who you speak to. Yeah, look, I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, I think that, thinking back to my younger years, my first few bands I was quite collaborative in, but then kind of slowly over time, there's always one person in the band who is kind of like, does everything. And the other guys are just at the bar or getting a kebab. And, over time, I mean, that guy was just kind of just me. And the more and more you do that, the more and more you kind of just realize it's just easier just to get stuff done. And I think, again, I mean, this Dez Dare project started out as was meant to be like a kind of like international band project. The other guys flaked out, and I did look at trying to get a band together when I first started, but I mean, I'm not super sociable. I'm also like 51, and Brighton's full of 20-year-olds. So that's not really going to work, and it's a little super weird, like the current Black Flag lineup. So yeah, kind of, I suppose I was talking to I had a publicist at the time when I first started Dez Dare, and like he was just like, just do it yourself. It's a pretty good idea. So yeah, I just started it. I mean, I think so again, like I think the thing is, I mean, if you want to work fast, it's easier to do it by yourself. It's nice to have people work with you. I have had other people work with me over the last 6 records now, but generally it's not a collaborative process. It's a kind of adding things to it that I can't do myself. Maybe in the future that might change. But also the problem is these days it's so expensive to tour. There's no way I could take this on the road with a band. I wouldn't be able to afford to. So I mean, it's really quite easy for me to like just pick up my gear, iPad, guitar, some pedals, get in the train to Berlin and play a couple of shows. I mean, that's that I can afford to do. I can't afford to bring along 2 or 3 people in a touring band and things like that. It is some control, a lot more practicality.
Do you end up putting everything you make straight on the album, or were there some songs that missed the cut? And if so, why?
There's definitely always stuff that misses the cut. I generally kind of maybe put together 15, 18 songs a year. I think generally it's if I run out of ideas, because again, I kind of build these from scratch. And if I start kind of working through them all and kind of layering them up. And if I start getting to kind of the 75% finished part of it, and I'm kind of not really feeling it or enjoying it, I kind of ditch those songs. If I can't think of a good idea for the lyric, if I can't think of a good guitar hook or something like that, it's just like, I tend to build albums too, kind of, even if it doesn't sound like it, I try and make it so there's a kind of some sort of weird flow to it. So, I mean, sometimes too, there's also just a song that might not necessarily just work. There might be too many of the same thing in one album. So there's definitely stuff that's been still sitting in my hard drive doing nothing.
I was just going to say, actually, you don't seem like the kind of person that very often goes back to listen to stuff that didn't make the cut. So have you got a hard drive full of about 50 ideas that you've abandoned and not returned to?
I don't go back to them, no. It's not because I don't want to necessarily. It's just I've probably got about another 50 ideas already lined up. And they're probably quite similar to the other 50 ideas already in my hard drive, just a different iteration of the other 50 ideas. So, yeah.
What's your personal favourite on this album?
I do there's a few songs on this record I like a lot just because they're kind of different to what I've done in the past. There is some mellower stuff on here and some more kind of emotionally driven sort of stuff versus the kind of more, talky, guitar-y, synthy sort of stuff. I really like We're Not Broken Sunshine, which is kind of big, fuzzy, distortion-y, slow thing. Big drum beats. There's a couple of pop songs on this album too. I think I'm the only person that likes Attribute versus Soul. No, I don't think anyone else has said they like that song, but I think that's actually one of my favourites. I like Beat Down Fuckface because it's a hilarious title.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that one. Where did the title come from for that?
It's kind of tied into dickheads, basically. I mean, I've been like watching some documentaries about like the new Louis Theroux documentary, and kind of. And it's not just about men. Like, I mean, I think women have some of this sort of men, like some of this mentality sometimes too. This kind of real kind of look at me. I mean, I'm like kind of. This is like, okay, calm down. I mean, no one needs to see you walk around town with your shirt off. You know what I mean? Just put it back on. Just don't be a dickhead. Basically, yeah, it's not super complicated.
We should just touch on the album cover too. That's one of your designs, is it?
Yes, I have used artists. There's been a few artists I've used over the last 5 years or so. But this time I did do the artwork myself. So I spent a lot of time cutting and pasting old comic books from the 30s and 40s into artwork. And you'll see by my artwork for this album, which is like got a different piece of artwork for every single song, it's all very cut and pasty.
I was going to say that actually, but I'll come on to that when we hit the social media section. Yeah, it's a very interesting style you've got because you've been doing the same thing with the videos as well, but we will come back to that. With your experiences through the years in the music industry, what's one piece of advice you would go back and tell your teenage self?
I don't think there's any advice I'd give myself. I wish that I was able to be better at being social, which is something that I'm not necessarily always great with. Our whole house here is neurodiverse, and I think a lot of people who are neurodiverse when they're much younger have struggled with some of that. I mean, that is kind of something I wish was different when I was younger. I found it a little bit difficult. I think generally, if I think about advice for people, young people, like sort of making music, it'd be like just make what you like. Don't worry about what is popular. Just make what you think is good, and then go find people who like what you do. You see this a lot, especially in Brighton. I mean, there's a big music college here, and there's so many bands these days like write songs for the algorithm. It's just like, man, really? I get it. We've all got to fucking do it. This is why I'm doing a song a month. We've all got to kind of do something to kind of feed into that behemoth. But, you've still got to fucking like what you do. And you still got to want to try and create something unique. If you're not doing that, then what's the fucking point?
Yeah, if you're not going to be unique, you might as well just use AI to make your music and have done with it.
Which a lot of people are these days. There's this horrible advert I get on Insta. I don't know why they feed it to me, but I get this horrible advert on Instagram that always comes up where there's this young music producers who go, I've got an idea for a song, but I don't know what to do with it. I just press this button, it creates the rest of the song for me. It's like, what's the point of that? That makes no sense. I'd much rather listen to someone with a cowbell and a fucking Casio going for 25 minutes than listen to any of that fucking nonsense.
Yeah, let's move on to your social media. You're about the same age as me. How do you find social media as a tool for promotion as somebody who lived the life without it back in the 90s?
I'm going to use comparison here, an industry comparison from the 2000s to now. Back when I was running the record label in Australia, we dealt with a lot of medium-sized bands and a lot of small bands. But we can still sell a few hundred copies on release day, even with a small band. The local chain, the country's chain would buy a bunch of copies. Some of the indies would buy some copies. You would place adverts in the right magazines, do some radio plugging, the usual sort of stuff. There was a handful of magazines, a handful of radio stations. It wasn't super complicated, and you knew you were going to kind of get your money back, at least enough to make the next record. Now you have to contact thousands of blogs who all have a handful of followers or whatever. You need to fight against a very flooded market, and you can't sell anything physical. So many bands these days, bands who used to sell okay, are struggling. It's really hard to sell records in stores. It's really hard to kind of get people's attention. So I think that's the problem, really. Kind of I think it used to be that people found slightly more value in music than what they do now. And it was an easier process to get music out there. Now, it's a really difficult process to get music out there. and you get much less return from what you're doing. I think the social media part of the world is one made, and like I'm going to like throw in DSPs like Spotify's and Apple's and stuff like that into that bunch. It's made all of our jobs as record label owners, bands, much, much, much harder and much more complicated. And it's also made bands, content creators, which is exhausting. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I love making like weird little videos and bits and pieces, and that stuff I find interesting. I don't find interesting like walking around the street going, "Hey, look at me! I'm in like Birmingham doing a gig." You know, what I mean, it's just I don't have the energy for it. And so I did try a lot of this last year. It didn't really get me anywhere. And a lot of the bands I like a lot of my favorite bands performers don't do any of that. So I think that kind of maybe it's not really worth it. If I could get off all of it tomorrow, I would. Go to an email list, online store. Maybe I will. Maybe this interview is what's going to force me over. It's going to make me go, yes, I'm doing it.
So onto YouTube. Your music video for When I'm Alone, I Forget You're Real is a really interesting piece. It's quite random while still making some degree of sense.
If I'm going to be honest, I mean, most of the film clips don't really have much to do with the actual song. It is just a collection of random stuff I've found online that I copy and paste in or cut and paste into videos. And I do quite like the weird randomness of that kind of artwork. Kind of like Winston Smith artworks, like the old Dead Kennedys artists, that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, obviously some of them tie in. I don't really think that well, no, I suppose that song does tie in, actually, because it's got the people in it. And the monkeys. Don't forget the monkeys. Monkeys people. There's a horror guy there. They're all lonely, I'm sure. Maybe feeling a bit, in need of love. It's hard to say. I don't know them.
There's a distinct element of 80s music videos to that and several of your other videos as well. That sort of the cut and paste feel. It just, to me, feels very, very much like my childhood growing up, in a way.
Yeah.
There's that sort of maybe aha sort of thing going on.
It's definitely not something I've been connected to in the past. I grew up through that. I started when in the 80s, I started skateboarding and, listening to music properly at that point. Back in, Geelong, there was kind of quite a big skate and punk scene. And, a lot of my friends I'm still friends with now, we're in that scene and we all ended up starting bands and playing in bands and I kind of filtered through. You pick up stuff along the way, don't you? I think that anyone who does anything for long enough collects all this stuff. Again, coming back to are you trying to create something unique or are you trying to create something for the algorithm or the industry? You can go and create something modern and new, if you want to do that. But what kind of I think a lot of artists do is build something that they've been built into for however long. And that's kind of, I suppose, where a lot of this comes from. It's just 30 years of influence and, kind of input.
I'd like to point out it's closer to 40 now, but there you go.
Yeah, thank you.
It's the same for me.
Yeah. Well, might have to go for a glass of wine after hearing that.
You've got a couple of shows in Scotland in mid-June. Is there a bigger tour planned at some stage, or do you just sort of take a little bit here and a little bit there these days?
I did push quite hard for shows last year. It was good to get out and about. I think I must have done over 25 shows last year, which is quite a lot for an artist my size. But it is expensive and tiring. I think this year I'm taking a bit of a step back from it. I'm still doing a bunch of shows. I'm meant to be going to Italy in August for a festival and a couple of shows down there, and I've got some shows in Berlin, potentially in Europe, in September. I'm still trying to pin them all down, as well as Scotland in June. So I'm taking a bit more of a relaxed attitude towards gigs because they're fun doing. It's nice to get out and see people and get to say hi to people who are interested in what you're doing. But it just it takes a lot of energy and money to go out and about.
So the album is out there, and there are still several single releases from the album to come over the next few months. But other than that, what comes next for you? Are you already working on the next album, for example?
I've already started thinking about it, so that's a bad thing, because that means I'm probably going to start recording it soon. it's kind of weird, it's kind of this weird kind of a snowball effect. I kind of start thinking about it and think, I should wait a bit longer to record it. Even, Murray's always giving me shit about it, going, oh, you said you weren't going to record another album for like ages. Like, yeah, I won't. Next thing, I'm fucking like plugging in like amplifiers and making all sorts of weird sounds. So, I think, sort of like I'll definitely like get something else recorded. I suppose the plan would probably be to have something else ready. I think the last single goes onto like streaming services in February next year. So March.
So the first single in March, and then another 12 months of singles, or will you try something different with that one?
It's hard to say at the moment. I think halfway through this schedule, I'll know kind of whether I think this has like been worthwhile or not. Yeah. I've seen this with like a lot of bands we've done work with. I mean, they kind of release like singular records, and they often don't want to do much in the way of lead up publicity. It's kind of like, well, we've got the album, we want to put it out like next month, and there's no videos. It's kind of like there needs to be some kind of strategy to kind of putting this stuff into the market. So kind of whether it's like exactly this or whether it's something else, I don't know, but it definitely won't. It'll definitely be kind of a progression from what this was.
And the final question, what music are you listening to at the moment that people may not be aware of and should take some time to check out?
I actually do a radio show in Brighton. I'd say great pleasure in like being a music nerd. This is like what it was like before streaming services, wasn't it? Both well aware, you would have remembered the time. You had to go to a record store to like and speak to like the guy behind the man or woman behind the counter and like find out like what was cool at the time. The newest 7 inches on the rack. And like take them away and have a listen to them, and you like take great pleasure in like telling your friends, "Have you not heard of this? This is amazing." It's a little bit different these days. All right, let's go. So we have Michiel, Meule. It's like I think they're French. It's like a guitarist and synth player with 2 drummers. Really cool stuff. I really like the new Wine Lips single. There's a band called Cosmic Club who I just stumbled across on Bandcamp the other week. They're really kind of cool, Jonathan Richmond-y, kind of jangly rock pop sort of stuff. Oh, there's a band called Taco Blaster who I really like a lot. They're slightly DIY punky sort of stuff. I actually really like this album by... I never knew this was a thing. There's a band called American Lips. It's members of another band. I forget the name of the other band they're in. They're a good band, though. There's so much good stuff around. I suppose that's one of the benefits and the curses of having a modern kind of structure of music industry. I mean, there's so much stuff you can get so easily anywhere. But that's also the problem. I mean, how do you get anyone's attention in a market that is so flooded?
For people wishing to find out more about Dez Dare, there's a website, dezdare.com, and he's on Instagram, Substack, YouTube, and Bandcamp. These Days Are Wild and Blind by Dez Dare is now out on Chimp via Bandcamp, and the songs released individually so far can be heard on all streaming platforms. Darren, thanks for the chat. It's been great to catch up.
Thank you. It's been good fun.